as well. You saw her earlier today. She is spitfire, that's all I gotta say. We've got Fanny Tacey coming on up of Fanny Pharmacies. This woman knows her stuff as well within the farming industry. Put your hands together for Franny and Andrew. Here we go, thank you.
Thank you, Franny, for helping me with this today. Okay, so where do you want to begin? Let's talk about farming. That's what we have people here for. Who out in the audience has grown hemp before? Anybody? Okay. Who's interested in doing it in the future? Okay, fantastic. So, I'm pretty bad at it. No, but on a serious note, you've been doing this since what, 2017. So you've got probably more experience than most of the people in the room in terms of growing. For people that are just getting into growing, I get a lot of questions, where do we begin? And what I like to talk to people about is, what do you want to do with it? Because when you get into growing, there's a lot of different things to consider, but at the end of the day, who's your marketplace, right? And so when you're thinking about a crop and what you're doing, what are some of the things that you think about as you got into this your first year?
Well, when I got into this, I grew for food and fiber, and I really recommend having a business plan and knowing what you're growing. But I was the first female in North Carolina. We were only the 7th state. Nobody knew what they were doing. We've come a long way. We know a lot more. We know what makes money and what is profitable. And biomass is its own industry. And then top cut flower is really where a lot of the artisans are and small businesses start out. So knowing your business and your market is huge. You do a lot on this huge scale manufacturing and then small scale. We started with plants in a room, to be honest. So we started with an indoor grow, but what everybody in the world really wants is a farm, and we put seeds in the ground. So.
Okay. Now, for people that are interested in growing, there's a lot of ways to grow this crop. Do you use clones or do you use seedlings? What do you typically do?
We will use seeds indoor at times, but generally we're using clones outdoors, and our grows are predominantly outdoor, and the benefit of the clone is it's going to be very consistent, so it makes it easier throughout the entire process of harvesting, managing the crop. Seeds, you really got to be careful. If you get one male plant out there and they will hermaphrodite, you're gonna have some males. If you're growing really large scale and you start getting males out there, it can really degrade the quality of the CBD content. We just didn't want to take that risk. But I love growing from seeds and actually watching the variety, and that's how we generate our clones. So again, starting with the end in mind, I didn't do that. I always leave then looked. I did all of it, and I would probably do it the same.
I would say that you got it in 2017, so the marketplace was a little bit different. The price points were a little bit better. If you fall down in 2017, it was a little bit easier to get up than it is today. I think you'd agree with that. So when you're looking at growing, what kind of time commitment does that take? How many acres did you have your first year?
Our first year, we had 2 acres, and that was too much. But then it seemed like a lot. We have growers for us. It was so much that we determined when we had growers and we wanted to start bringing in a farmer network, we said in order to do that, you could only grow 1 acre. And that was it. And It's a lot, it costs a lot, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of input if you want to do it right. It's a lot of time. It's just a lot in every way. And it is still one of the most rewarding, amazing things I've ever done in my life. And if you ever have the opportunity to plant and grow, you will end up realizing you work for a plant. It takes a lot of time, and some would say your entire life from planting to harvest, 6 months.
So did you have any staff members, or is it just you? Had to be more than you.
It was me and another full-time grower, and then we had a lot of volunteers. We definitely had a lot of volunteers, and it was really the motivation behind starting the Women in Hemp nonprofit, getting involved with our local extension agents. We used some of the crop that we had, we shared it among 2 research stations, so I kind of had them always keeping me in check. It's great to grow with friends.
So, and that was just 2 acres, so you had 2 full-time growers and then a variety of volunteers. Anybody looking at doing this, keep that in mind. I remember the first time I went out to harvest, I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. I work around large-scale equipment. We've got tractors, combines. I'm used to corn and soybeans, and so I went out there and we had a big blade, and these plants were about 7 foot tall, and we started whacking them. Then you have to drag them about 200 yards so that you can stick them in a sack, and you can get 3 or 4 of these in a sack, and then you have to go get another sack, and then it's been an hour and you haven't done anything, and now you've got 2 acres left to harvest, and so it's a daunting job. Quite honestly, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. So why do you do it?
Well, I'm very curious, and I don't ever believe what anybody says, and I want to try it and do it all myself, and it was a great opportunity, and I leaped before I looked. And now, we didn't have any foundation at that time. So now we're here really trying to let y'all know what we know. I will say all the time, I know exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. And I'll share it all. You need to know if you're going to grow. It can be very, very intensive. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's really a commitment.
It is an absolute commitment, but the great thing is, it's just a season. It's kind of like a pregnancy, I said. You grow, and then after that, though, just know, like harvesting is the biggest thing ever. Then you have to dry properly and cure it, because top cut flour is where your money is. So if you really want to be growing and making money, which I suggest, but I didn't do it for quite a while, I had to figure that out. It takes a lot.
Yeah,
it takes a lot.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's definitely a labor of love, and the people
what happens if you don't dry it right?
Well, you wasted all of the months that you put that in the ground. You've got
drowned your baby.
Yeah, it's going to mold. A lot of people don't realize how quickly it molds. We've had people try field drying in wet climates, and overnight they lost an entire crop. 40 acres of CBD material just gone to the mold. And then what's worse is, you get into a couple years ago, and people were still trying to pass that off as good material. Because the marketplace didn't know that, the difference. So, thank goodness we've gone through some of those hurdles, and now we're in a place where people know a little bit more about, in terms of what they're buying when they're buying from people, what the material is.
Which is really good. The standards are higher now. And most people that are buying top cut flour are going to look for higher standards, look for mold and pesticide tests. Consumers are becoming a lot more knowledgeable about their flour. They want to see the COA, the Certificate of Authenticity Analysis, that says what the terpenes are. people are becoming more educated. I mean, growing is becoming, I've always said it's a horticulture. For CBD, it's horticulture, it's not agriculture. Like fiber, food, mass acreage, that's more of an agriculture grow. This is like medicine, plant medicine, essentially. And people are a lot smarter about what they're consuming and they want to know.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up terpenes. When you look going back to 2015, 2016, that very early time, all there was CBD, right? And now the marketplace has developed a little bit. We're starting to see some of the minor cannabinoids. People have interest in CBD, CBN, CBG, things like that. Obviously, if you look out here, we're seeing a lot of Delta-8 product. But terpenes are things that people are looking for as well. So when you're looking at how you're growing your plant, for instance, if you're trying to go into that type of marketplace, the way that you care for that plant, the way that you grow for that plant is even more important than if you're growing for just a cannabinoid, because the terpene degradation can happen so very, very quickly. But a lot of people just don't even realize that that's a marketplace that's out there where people are buying terpenes and selling terpenes, and that's just one of the aspects, other than just selling, the flower itself. You focus a lot on the oil, the extraction of the oil, and have you gone into any minor cannabinoids yourself?
Now, what we do at Brandy's Pharmacy is when I first planted hemp, got involved in a research trial. In order to do that, there's no government funding, you might understand, there's not grants for businesses, a lot of things. We actually started a nonprofit, Women in Hemp, to raise money and fund research, a 3-year research trial. This year is going to culminate the research trial, and it'll be the first on-farm data for 3 years in a field trial ever. I totally just got distracted going down the research trial. What was the question again?
Oh, I was talking about have you gone into any minor cannabinoids?
Right. So we don't. So I'm all about what we're doing, and what our growers actually do is we grow one variety that comes from the same breeders. We're in 3 years of research. We're creating a product where we want to talk about consistency. And I like geek out on the research behind it. So we'll top cut our flower just so we have some to kind of say, this is the flower that grew on Brandy's farm and with our pharmacies and our farmers. But we would use our top cut flower along with our biomass, which is we buck and shuck the plant, harvest the whole plant, buck and shuck it. And we use a lot of the top cut. We'll do the prime top cut and we'll sell it in our smokable bud bars, and then the rest of it we use in our biomass. So we grow very, very different than most people would ever grow, but there was the reasoning behind it.
So let's talk about that for a minute. You mentioned drying and the importance of drying, and then you dry it. How do you dry? Do you hang dry? Do you have some sort of machine drying technology? What do you do?
We now hang dry. Oh my gosh, our first year drying, we had no idea how much it takes, and I live on a farm. We have 4 outbuildings, and we have an event barn, and we had it hanging in every one of them with fans, dehumidifiers. It is so great if you ever go back and look through our history. It really feels like 1920s type of stuff. It was great, but that was traumatic, and so we built a drying barn. And it's got lights in it, and fans, and dehumidifiers. It's nothing outrageously fancy. It's just a drying barn, and we dry it on our farm.
So how long do you need to keep it in there the way that you've got it set up, with the air pulling through like you do?
So we plant successively so we can harvest successively, and usually run it in a week. So you're hoping, 65 is easy. For temperature and humidity, that would be ideal. It's usually higher, but let's face it, I'm drying in a barn. It might take longer. It depends on what the outside temperature is too, even though it's an insulated space. But anywhere, depending if we buck and chucked it and we brought in smaller ones to a whole plant, it needs to reach its place within 3 to 7 days is ideal.
Now, you said something interesting. You plant successfully so that you can harvest successfully, and then ultimately that allows you to have one drying facility. How do you space that out? Is it every 7 days? And then how many plants do you do in that rotation? So
in our trials, and again, I love a system because it just keeps me doing what I say I'm going to do. So every 2 weeks we plant in our field. We planted 2 weeks apart. So therefore we get to harvest a little bit apart. And we'll go through, like I said, we top cut everything first. And then that's how we plant successfully, we harvest successfully.
And when do you start? When's your first planting?
Mother's Day. I always say Mother's Day. It's going to be in or around Mother's Day every year, depending on the weather. I really like it when it aligns with the full moon and some other things. But that's usually, that May is a great marker. We, like I said, plant successively. We planted in late May. We did one in June, and we actually did one in July. Guess what we found out? Don't plant in July.
What happened?
Not a lot. I'm growing outdoors, so you hit the solstice, and I don't care what they say, we tried auto flowers, and never gonna do that again, especially outdoor. It's just not for outdoors, because you gotta plant it a foot apart, and it's super, then you become labor intensive to get one bud. It just didn't really make sense. Maybe if you had it mechanized outside, or y'all looking at that, I see some, every variety, we have variety trials too. So we grow our NC State trial, and then we do this for other varieties. I always suggest, if you're doing it for a little bit fun, researchy like I am, grow different varieties. It's amazing. It's just amazing, the difference between growing something that's indica dominant versus sativa dominant versus some of them will have 3 leaves, they're purple, they're just beautiful plants. I suggest growing varieties.
Yeah, you brought up autoflower, and I, as a machine guy, I really like autoflower. They're all the same size. We know when we can predict when we're going to harvest, and it makes things very easy for me. But I can understand if you're going to do it in a horticultural style grow, that might not be the way to do that.
Okay, so tell me about that. So y'all plant those. What's the spacing?
Oh, we typically plant those 30 inches apart.
30 inches?
Yeah, so they're really tight spacing, 30 by 30.
30 by 30. So how many plants are you getting in an acre?
Oh, you're gonna.
But nobody's gonna do an acre of that, though, right?
No, that's what you're gonna do.
What is the general size of it?
Oh, you're gonna do 40 to 60 acres.
Anybody got 40 to 60 acres to plant? Autoflower. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so again, you need to do some testing, because what we don't know is how does that autoflower grow in your field and your sunlight conditions and all those different things, even though it's not supposed to respond to sunlight. But long story short,
we got one in our trials. I'm not growing it anymore. I don't like it, but it's on the trials.
But what you can do is you can do tight row spacing. Sometimes we'll see it just direct seeded, so we don't even have to mess with any of the transplanting. And I'm not sure if you're doing that by hand or mechanized, but both ways are difficult. And so direct seeding this in the ground, 30-inch plant spacing, then you can come back with a header and pull that material in. Now, you're not going to get a lot per plant, like you say, but at the same time, we're typically seeing a lot cheaper input cost, because the seeds have typically been less expensive. We're not necessarily seeing 15% CBD.
The growth cycle on it is less as well.
Yeah, you're a really short growth cycle. So some people can get 2 seasons in with 60 to sometimes 75 days between planting and harvest.
So that's what I've been seeing on the autoflower. Oh, right, we get to wrap up. That's what we've been seeing on the autoflower though, is tight spacing.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
And
because
shorter cycles, getting 2 grow cycles in there that maximizes your profit, and what you're growing is money. It's a little money tree because it's usually just bud. If you want to know what autoflower is. But we're out of time. We were going to answer questions, but
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I'll be around for a little while if anyone has any questions. Feel free to contact I don't know how to get a hold of me. Visit my website, hempharvestworks.com, and there's a contact me button. Thank you.